The morning sun cast long shadows across the mining colony on Kepler 442b. Kang Dae-ho stood at the observation deck, watching the empty paths between buildings. 3 weeks ago, those same paths buzzed with activity. Workers heading to the mines, children playing in the courtyards, merchants selling goods from distant worlds. Now the colony felt like a tomb. The creatures surrounded them on all sides. The colonists called them Ravak, though nobody knew their real name. They looked like wolves, but walked on 2 legs and carried weapons. Each one stood 7 feet tall, with silver fur and yellow eyes that seemed to glow in the dark. Their teeth could tear through metal, and their claws left marks on concrete walls. Dae-ho had counted at least 80 of them in the forest around the settlement. They moved in perfect coordination, like dancers following the same music. When one moved left, 3 others covered the right. When 5 attacked from the front, 10 more flanked from behind. They never acted alone. They were always part of something bigger. Park Soo-jin walked up beside him, carrying her research tablet. Her dark hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her clothes looked wrinkled from sleeping in the lab again. She studied alien creatures for a living, but the Ravak confused her more than any species she had encountered. "Any luck with the communication attempts?" Dae-ho asked, without looking away from the forest. Soo-jin shook her head. "They respond to our signals, but we cannot understand their language. It sounds like howling mixed with clicking sounds. Sometimes, they make noises so low that our equipment barely picks them up." She pulled up data on her tablet. "Look at this movement pattern from yesterday." The screen showed dots moving across a map. The Ravak moved like water flowing around rocks. When human guards took positions on the north wall, the creatures shifted south. When colonists tried to escape through the old mining tunnels, the aliens were already waiting at the exit points. "They think as one unit," Soo-jin continued, "like a hive mind, but not exactly. Each individual makes decisions, but those decisions fit perfectly with what all the others are doing. I have never seen anything like it in nature." Dae-ho finally turned to look at her. His face showed the stress of 3 weeks without proper sleep. As head of colony security, he felt responsible for every life trapped inside these walls. 200 people looked to him for answers, but he had none to give. "The Alliance ships will get through," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "Will they?" Soo-jin asked quietly. They both knew about the previous rescue attempts. The first ship had tried a direct assault with 20 armed soldiers. The Ravak tore them apart in minutes. The soldiers fought bravely, but they could not match the creatures' coordination. Every move the humans made, the aliens had already prepared a counter. The second ship brought diplomats who tried to negotiate. The Ravak listened politely to the translation devices, then killed the diplomats and destroyed their shuttle. They left the wreckage where everyone could see it. The third ship never even landed. It exploded in the atmosphere when Ravak fighters swarmed it like angry bees. The pilots never had a chance to call for help. Lee Tae-min, the colony administrator, joined them on the observation deck. His usually neat appearance had deteriorated over the past weeks. His shirt had stains, his face needed shaving, and his eyes held the haunted look of a man watching his world fall apart. "The food supplies will last another 2 weeks," he reported. "Maybe 3 if we cut rations again. After that..." He did not need to finish the sentence. Kim Nari appeared in the doorway behind them. The young communications officer looked even more tired than the others. She had been working around the clock, trying to reach anyone who could help. Her equipment filled 3 rooms, and she knew how to use every piece of it. "I have been monitoring Galactic Alliance channels," she said. 3 more rescue fleets are coming. The first one arrives tomorrow." "What species?" Dae-ho asked. "Catherine," Nari replied. "They are sending their best aerial strike force," Soo-jin frowned. "Birds. They fight in flocks, just like Earth birds, coordinated but predictable." "They are the Alliance's top pilots," Tae-min protested. "Their success rate is..." 97%. Against enemies that fight like armies, Sujin said. The Ravak do not fight like an army. They fight like... Like what? Deho asked. Sujin stared at her tablet, scrolling through behavioral data. Like the perfect pack hunters. Every strategy we use against them, they have seen before. Every formation we create, they know how to break. It is as if they evolved specifically to counter organized military tactics. Deho walked to the edge of the deck and gripped the railing. The metal was cold under his fingers. In the distance, he could see Ravak sentries watching from the tree line. They never hid completely. They wanted the humans to see them, to know they were trapped. My grandfather used to hunt, he said quietly. In the mountains back on Earth. He taught me to track deer, to move silently through the forest. He said there were two types of hunters in the old days. Pack hunters who worked together and lone hunters who worked alone. Humans are pack hunters, Nari said. We work in groups, form armies, build cities together. Deho shook his head. Not always. Sometimes when the pack failed, a single hunter had to go where others could not follow. The others looked at him strangely. Sujin pulled up more data on her tablet, cross-referencing human evolutionary history with known galactic species. Her eyes widened as she read. Every intelligent species in the galaxy evolved from pack animals, she said slowly. Birds fly in flocks. Insects work in hives. Even the solitary species like the Kethran still follow flock behaviors when they fight. But humans... What about humans? Taemin asked. Humans evolved from both pack hunters and ambush predators. We can work together, but we can also work alone. No other known species has that flexibility. Sujin looked up from her tablet. The Ravak have probably never encountered a true solitary hunter. Deho stared out at the forest. They read our formations, predict our group tactics, counter our coordinated attacks. But what if there was no formation to read? No group tactics to predict? You are talking about suicide, Taemin said. Maybe, Deho replied. Or maybe I'm talking about something they have never seen before. The afternoon sun began to set, painting the sky orange and red. In a few hours, the Ravak would begin their nightly patrol around the colony perimeter. They followed the same pattern every night, precise as clockwork. It was another example of their perfect coordination, but perfect coordination required predictable enemies. What would they do if faced with something completely unpredictable? Deho made his decision as the first stars appeared in the alien sky. Tomorrow, the Kethran would try their aerial assault. It would fail, just like all the others. But maybe, while the aliens were focused on the flocking birds above, a lone hunter could find a different path. The thought scared him more than he wanted to admit. It meant abandoning everything civilized about himself and becoming something older, something that his grandfather had glimpsed in those mountain forests long ago, something the galaxy had never seen before. The Kethran strike force arrived at dawn. Their ships looked like massive metal birds with swept-back wings and bright yellow markings. Commander Velkan led 12 of the finest pilots in the Galactic Alliance. Each one had decades of combat, experience, and perfect flight records. Sujin watched from the communications room as the Kethran ships formed their attack pattern. They moved in a tight diamond formation, each pilot knowing exactly where the others would be at every moment. It was beautiful to watch, like a deadly dance in the sky. Beginning attack run, Velkan's voice crackled through the speakers. All units. Maintain formation Delta 7. Watch for ground fire. The Kethran ships dove toward the forest where the Ravak waited, their weapons charged with blue energy, ready to clear a path to the colony. For a moment, Sujin allowed herself to hope. Maybe this time would be different. The hope died quickly. The Ravak did not scatter like normal ground troops when the ships dove toward them. Instead, they moved in perfect synchronization. As the first Kethran ship fired, 30 Ravak on the ground-raised weapons that looked like twisted metal tubes. They fired at exactly the same instant. The energy beams created a web of destruction in the sky. The Kethran pilots tried to break formation, but the Ravak had predicted their evasive maneuvers. Every escape route was already covered. Every possible flight path had become a trap. 3 Kethran ships exploded in the first 5 seconds. The remaining pilots pulled up hard, trying to gain altitude and regroup. But the Ravak ground units were moving again, repositioning for the next attack wave. They read our formation like a book. Velkan's voice was tight with fear. How did they know where we would be? Sujin could have answered him. The Ravak studied flock behavior the same way scientists studied physics. They understood how groups moved, how they communicated, how they made decisions together. The Kethran formation was just another flock to them. The aerial battle lasted 18 minutes. When it ended, all 12 Kethran ships were burning wreckage scattered across the forest. Commander Velkan's last transmission was a warning to other Alliance forces. Stay away. They are not like anything we have ever fought. The second rescue attempt came 3 days later. The Moltec heavy infantry considered themselves the finest ground troops in the galaxy. Their bodies looked like walking tanks, covered in natural armor plating that could stop plasma bolts. They carried weapons that could punch through starship hulls. Captain Grokmar led 40 Moltec soldiers in a direct assault on the Ravak positions. They advanced in perfect formation, shields overlapping, weapons ready. Each soldier knew his exact position and role. It was military precision at its finest. Deho watched through binoculars as the Moltec force moved through the forest. They looked unstoppable, like a metal wall rolling forward. Their discipline was perfect. Not one soldier broke formation or moved without orders. That discipline became their weakness. The Ravak let them advance halfway to the colony before attacking. But they did not attack the formation head-on. Instead, they struck at the edges, the weak points, the places where perfect military discipline became a liability. While the Moltec soldiers maintained their formation, the Ravak flowed around them, like water around rocks. They attacked from above, dropping from trees. They attacked from below, bursting out of hidden tunnels. They attacked from impossible angles that no military manual had ever considered. The Moltec weapons were powerful, but they could only fire where the soldiers were looking. The Ravak came from everywhere at once. When a soldier turned to face one threat, 2 more attacks came from behind. Captain Grokmar tried to adapt, calling for new formations and tactical adjustments. But every change he made, the Ravak had already anticipated. They moved 3 steps ahead of his military thinking. The battle ended when the last Moltec soldier fell defending his captain's body. They had fought bravely, but bravery was not enough. Against an enemy that understood war better than any textbook. The third rescue attempt was the most sophisticated. The Zephyrian Stealth Corps were masters of invisibility and surprise attacks. They could become transparent, walk through walls, and strike without warning. If any force could succeed, it should have been them. Admiral Nix Oth led 20 of the most elite Zephyrian operatives on a night infiltration mission. They approached the colony using advanced cloaking technology that made them invisible to all known detection methods. Even their thoughts were shielded from psychic scanning. Sujin tracked their progress using specialized sensors that could barely detect their energy signatures. The Zephyrians moved like ghosts through the forest, past Ravak sentries, toward the colony perimeter. For 2 hours, the mission went perfectly. The Zephyrians penetrated deep into Ravak territory without being detected. They reached the outer buildings of the colony and began preparing extraction zones for the colonists. Then, everything went wrong at once. The Ravak had known about the infiltration from the beginning. They had allowed the Zephyrians to advance, to believe they were succeeding. But the creatures were not using their eyes to track the invisible intruders. They were using their noses. Zephyrian cloaking technology could hide them from sight, from energy sensors, even from psychic detection. But it could not hide their scent. The Ravak's sense of smell was hundreds of times more sensitive than human noses. They could track a single molecule across kilometers of forest. The trap closed with brutal efficiency. Ravak soldiers emerged from hiding places around each Zephyrian operative. The invisible intruders suddenly found themselves surrounded by enemies who knew exactly where they were. Admiral Nixoth's final transmission was barely a whisper. They hunt by scent. Our stealth means nothing to them. We are pack hunters trying to fight the ultimate pack. The Zephyrians died fighting, but they never had a real chance. Their greatest advantage had been turned into a fatal weakness. After the third failure, the Galactic Alliance declared the colony a lost cause. No more rescue ships would come. The surviving colonists were left to face their fate alone. Daeho found Su-Jin in her laboratory that night. She was studying combat footage from all three battles, searching for patterns that might explain the failures. "They are not just pack hunters," she said without looking up from her screens. "They are anti-pack hunters. They evolved specifically to destroy organized groups." "Every species in the galaxy fights in groups," Daeho observed. "Flocks, swarms, formations, teams, always together." "Yes. And the Ravak have learned to read every type of group behavior. When they see a flock, they know how it will move. When they see a military formation, they know where it will strike. When they see a coordinated team, they know how it will think." Su-Jin finally turned to look at him. Her eyes were red from hours of staring at screens, but they held a new understanding. "Every intelligent species works together," she continued. "It is how we survived, how we built civilizations, how we reached the stars. But it is also our weakness. We think in groups, act in groups, make decisions as groups." Daeho nodded slowly. "And they can read group thinking like we read books." "Exactly. The question is, what would happen if they encountered something that did not think like a group?" They stared at each other in the dim light of the laboratory. Around them, the colony slept uneasily, protected only by walls that would not hold for much longer. Outside, the Ravak maintained their patient siege, waiting for the humans to make their next predictable group decision. But perhaps it was time for something unpredictable, something that had nothing to do with groups or packs or coordinated thinking, something solitary. Su-Jin spent the next 2 days buried in research files from Earth. She pulled up everything the colony database contained about human evolution, hunting patterns, and behavioral psychology. What she found changed everything she thought she knew about her own species. "Look at this," she said, calling Daeho to her workstation. The screen showed a timeline of human development spanning millions of years. Every other intelligent species evolved from pure pack animals. The Kethrin descended from flocking birds. The Moltec came from hive insects. The Zephyrians evolved from group-hunting fish. Daeho studied the data. "What about humans?" "That is the interesting part. Humans evolved from multiple hunting strategies. Early humans were pack hunters, yes. They worked together to bring down large prey, but they were also persistence hunters who could chase animals alone for days, and ambush predators who stalked prey in complete silence." She pulled up more files, showing archaeological evidence. "Look at these hunting sites. Some show group kills where dozens of humans work together, but others show single kills made by individual hunters working alone. No other species has this dual nature. So humans can hunt in packs or alone," Daeho said. "Why does that matter?" Su-Jin switched to behavioral studies. "Because the Ravak cannot understand what they have never encountered. Their entire evolutionary history prepared them to fight pack hunters. They read group dynamics, predict collective behavior, counter-coordinated attacks. But a true solitary hunter would be invisible to them," Daeho finished. "Not physically invisible, but mentally invisible. They would not be able to predict its behavior because they have no evolutionary framework for understanding it." Su-Jin pulled up linguistic analysis of intercepted Ravak communications. Look at their language structure. They have dozens of words for different types of group hunting. Pack, flock, swarm, herd, pride, colony. But no word for individual hunter. The concept does not exist in their minds. Daeho felt something stirring in his memory. His grandfather's voice from childhood camping trips in the Korean mountains. Sometimes the wolf pack fails to bring down the deer. Then the lone hunter must finish what the pack started. My grandfather told me stories, Daeho said slowly, about the old days when humans still hunted for survival. He said there were two types of people, those who hunted with others and those who hunted alone. The lone hunters were rare, but they could go places and do things that groups could never manage. Sujin nodded excitedly. Exactly. Modern humans mostly lost those instincts because civilization made them unnecessary. But the genetic potential is still there. The neural pathways still exist. You are talking about me becoming some kind of primitive hunter, Daeho said. I am talking about you accessing instincts that civilization buried but did not eliminate. Every human still has the capacity for solitary predation. It is just dormant in most people. Nari appeared in the doorway, carrying her communication equipment. I have been analyzing the Ravak radio transmissions, she said. Their language is fascinating. They have incredibly complex terms for pack coordination but almost no words for individual action. She set down her tablet and showed them a translation. Matrix. When they talk about humans, they use the word small pack. They cannot conceive of us as individuals. To them, we are just a very small group. What would happen if they encountered a true individual? Sujin asked. Someone acting, completely alone with no pack instincts at all? Nari frowned at her data. Based on their communication patterns, I think it would confuse them. Their tactical discussions always assume enemies will act as groups. They plan for coordinated responses, predictable formations, group decision-making. Taemin joined them, drawn by the unusual activity in the laboratory. His face showed the strain of weeks under siege, but his eyes held desperate hope when he saw their research. Are you saying there might be a way out of this? He asked. Daeho looked at the others. Maybe, but it would mean giving up everything. That makes me human. Pack instincts, social behaviors, civilized thinking. I would have to become something older. How much older? Taemin asked. Sujin consulted her evolutionary timeline. Hundreds of thousands of years. Back when humans were apex predators who hunted alone in the African wilderness. Before language, before tools, before society, just pure hunting instinct. The room fell silent as they considered the implications. Daeho would have to strip away millennia of human development and become something that no longer existed on Earth, something that the galaxy had never seen. The psychological risks are enormous, Sujin warned. Humans who completely suppress their social instincts can lose their ability to relate to other people. They can become permanently isolated, unable to rejoin civilization. And if I do, everyone in this colony dies, Daeho replied. Nari pulled up more Ravak communications. Their patrol patterns are completely predictable because they assume all enemies are predictable. They position sentries to watch for group movements, coordinate responses to organized attacks, plan counters to standard military tactics. But they would not know how to respond to chaos, Sujin added. A single individual acting without pattern, without coordination, without any of the behavioral markers they understand. Daeho walked to the laboratory window and stared out at the bee forest. Somewhere in those trees, Ravak sentries maintained their perfect vigil. They watched every approach to the colony, covered every escape route, prepared for every possible rescue attempt. But they were watching for groups, formations, coordinated efforts. They were not watching for a ghost. My grandfather taught me to track deer through mountain forests, Daeho said quietly. He said the secret was to stop thinking like a human and start thinking like the prey, to become part of the landscape, to move without pattern, to exist without disturbing the natural flow of the wilderness. The Ravak would not know how to track something like that, Nari observed. Their communication intercepts show they track enemies by predicting group behavior. They cannot predict what has no group. Sujin pulled up human psychological profiles. The process would be dangerous. You would have to suppress not just your social instincts, but your entire civilized identity. Language, rational thought, cultural, conditioning, everything that connects you to other humans. For how long? Taemin asked. Until the job is done, Daeho answered, however long that takes. They spent the rest of the day planning the transformation. Sujin researched human predatory instincts and how to access them. Nari analyzed Ravak communication patterns to find weaknesses in their coordination. Taemin prepared the colony for what might be their last hope. As night fell, Daeho began the process of forgetting how to be human. He started by removing his uniform and putting on simple, dark clothing, with no insignia or identification. No badges of rank, no symbols of authority, no markers of his place in human society. Next, he disabled his communication implants and removed his personal identification devices. He could not be tracked, monitored, or contacted. He had to become invisible to human technology as well as alien senses. The hardest part was mental. Daeho sat in meditation, systematically shutting down the parts of his mind that connected him to other people. Language centers, social recognition, empathy responses, all the neural pathways that made him part of human civilization. What remained was something older and hungrier, something that watched the forest with predatory patience and calculated movement patterns based on ancient instincts rather than modern tactics. By midnight, Kang Daeho had ceased to exist. In his place sat something that had no name and belonged to no pack. The thing that had once been Daeho sat motionless in the darkness, listening to sounds that civilized humans could not hear. His breathing slowed to match the rhythm of the forest. His heartbeat steadied to blend with the pulse of nocturnal life. Everything that marked him as human gradually faded away. Sujin watched from across the room, disturbed by what she was witnessing. The man she had spoken with hours earlier was disappearing before her eyes. His facial expressions became neutral, his posture changed from human to something else, and his eyes developed the flat, patient stare of a hunting animal. "The transformation is more complete than I expected," she whispered to Nari. Nari nodded nervously. "He is not responding to social cues anymore. When I spoke to him 20 minutes ago, he looked at me like I was prey. The creature that had..." Bien Daeho turned its head toward them. For a moment, Sujin felt genuine fear. Those eyes held no recognition, no human warmth, no connection to the civilized world. They were the eyes of something that existed only to hunt. Then the moment passed and some flicker of humanity returned. Daeho blinked and seemed to remember where he was. "Sorry," he said, though his voice sounded different. Flatter, more controlled. "It is getting harder to maintain conscious thought." "The psychological suppression is working," Sujin observed. "But it may be irreversible if you go too deep." Daeho considered this with the detached interest of someone examining a scientific problem. "The colony needs a predator, not a human. If becoming that predator costs my humanity, it is still a fair trade." His casual acceptance of losing himself chilled everyone in the room. This was not the man who had joked with guards and comforted frightened colonists. This was something that calculated costs and benefits with cold precision. Over the next 2 days, the transformation accelerated. Daeho stopped eating regular meals, instead consuming small amounts of food at irregular intervals. He stopped following human sleep patterns, instead dozing for short periods throughout the day and night. He stopped engaging in conversation unless directly questioned. Most disturbing of all, he stopped thinking in words. Sujin watched him communicate through gestures, drawings, and simple sounds. He was teaching himself to process information. without language, to react to stimuli without conscious thought. He is accessing neural pathways that modern humans rarely use, she explained to Tae-min. Pre-linguistic thought patterns, instinctive responses, predatory calculations. It is like watching evolution run in reverse. Tae-min studied the creature that had once been his security chief. Will he remember his mission? Will he remember us? I do not know, Soo-jin admitted. At some point, the predator instincts may override everything else. Nari had been monitoring Ravak communications and noticed something interesting. Their radio chatter has changed, she reported. They are discussing unusual readings from their perimeter sensors. Nothing definitive, but they sense something different in the area. The predator's head snapped up at this news, its eyes focused with laser intensity on Nari's data. They feel you already, Soo-jin said to it. Even before you leave the colony, your presence is affecting them. The creature nodded once, then returned to its preparations. It had fashioned simple tools from scavenged materials, a knife made from sharpened metal, a sling constructed from cloth and cord, nothing sophisticated or technological, just implements, that extended its natural abilities. It studied maps of the area, but not in the way a human would. Instead of planning routes and timing, it seemed to be absorbing the landscape, internalizing the terrain until it became part of its mental geography. On the third night, it was ready. The creature stood at the colony's rear exit, where the walls met the edge of the forest. Beyond lay Ravak territory, patrolled by sentries who had never failed to detect intruders. Soo-jin made one final attempt to reach the human buried inside the predator. Dae-ho, can you hear me? It turned to look at her. For a moment, she thought she saw recognition in its eyes. Then it spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. Dae-ho was a human name. Humans think in groups, act in groups, die in groups. I am not human anymore. What are you? She asked. I am what humans were before they learned to need each other. The creature moved to the exit and paused. When it spoke again, its voice held traces of the man it had been. If I do not return as myself, remember that I chose this. The colony needed a monster, so I became one. Then it was gone, slipping through the exit and into the forest with movements so fluid they seemed unnatural. Soo-jin rushed to the observation window but could see nothing in the darkness beyond the tree line. Tracking sensors show no movement, Nari reported, checking her instruments. He is already invisible to our technology, Soo-jin realized. If we cannot detect him, maybe the Ravak cannot either. The first test came within an hour. Ravak sentries patrolled the forest in groups of 3, covering overlapping sectors with military precision. Their enhanced senses could detect human scent from kilometers away, and their coordination made stealth impossible. But the creature that had been Dae-ho was no longer quite human. It moved through their patrol zone like smoke, following paths that existed between their sensory coverage. It did not avoid the Ravak directly, but flowed around them in ways their pack-oriented minds could not predict. When a 3-member patrol passed near its position, the creature did something that violated all tactical logic. Instead of hiding or retreating, it followed them, not to attack, but to study. For 2 hours, it tracked the patrol through their route, learning their communication patterns, their response times, their behavioral rhythms. The Ravak sensed something wrong, but could not identify the threat. Their sensors detected no hostile movement. Their scent analysis found no intruders. Their coordination protocols showed no enemy groups. But their instincts screamed danger. The patrol leader made increasingly frequent radio checks with headquarters. The other pack members showed signs of stress, constantly scanning the forest for threats they could not name. By the end of their shift, all 3 Ravak were exhibiting behavior their species associated with being hunted. But there was no hunter. There was no pack stalking them. There was no organized threat. There was only something that moved without pattern, thought without language, and existed without being part of anything larger than itself. The creature that had been Day-Ho learned valuable lessons from its first night in Ravak territory. Their coordination was perfect against organized enemies, but it made them predictable to something that recognized patterns without being bound by them. They communicated constantly, which meant their positions were always known to anything listening. They moved in formation, which meant their future positions could be calculated. They followed protocols, which meant their responses were predetermined. Most importantly, they could not conceive of a threat that was not also a pack. When the creature returned to the colony before dawn, it brought intelligence that no military force could have gathered. It knew how the Ravak thought, how they moved, how they coordinated their perfect defense, and it knew their weaknesses. Su-Jin found it sitting in the laboratory, staring at nothing with those flat predator eyes. It had been gone for 8 hours, but somehow it looked different, more dangerous, more alien. "What did you learn?" she asked. It looked at her for a long moment before answering in its new, emotionless voice. "I learned that they are prey. They just do not know it yet." The creature began its real work on the 4th night. It no longer came to Su-Jin or the others for consultation. It no longer reported its activities or asked for supplies. It simply existed at the edge of human society, taking what it needed and disappearing into the darkness. Su-Jin watched it prepare for another mission, moving with mechanical precision. It had stopped acknowledging her presence unless she spoke directly to it, and even then its responses were brief and emotionless. "You are losing yourself," she said. It paused in checking its simple weapons. "I lost myself 3 days ago. What remains is what the colony needs." "What happens when this is over? How do you become human again?" The creature looked at her with those flat, predatory eyes. "Maybe I do not." Then it was gone, flowing through the exit and into the forest like a shadow given substance. This time it did not simply observe the Ravak patrols. This time it began to hunt, but it did not hunt the way any military force would hunt. It did not seek direct confrontation or tactical advantage. Instead, it hunted the way ancient persistence hunters had pursued prey across the African plains, with patience, endurance, and the terrible certainty of inevitable death. The creature chose a single Ravak scout named Velkash, though it did not know or care about names. It simply identified one individual who separated slightly from its pack during routine patrols, a target that could be isolated without triggering immediate pack responses. For 6 hours, the creature followed Velkash through the forest, not attacking, not threatening, just following. Always staying exactly at the edge of perception, never quite close enough to be detected, but never far enough away to be forgotten. Velkash began to sense the pursuit after the first hour. Its ears twitched at sounds that might have been footsteps. Its nose caught scents that might have been a predator. Its eyes searched shadows that might have hidden a threat. But there was nothing definitive, nothing its pack training had prepared it to handle. The Ravak scout tried standard evasion techniques. It changed direction suddenly, doubled back on its own trail, used terrain features to break line of sight. All methods that worked against pack hunters who could be confused or misdirected. The creature following it was not confused. It did not think in terms of trails or directions or tactical positions. It thought in terms of prey, and prey could only run for so long. By the 3rd hour, Velkash was showing signs of stress. It made frequent radio checks with its pack, reporting vague sensations of being watched. The pack leader ordered routine responses, increased alertness, defensive positioning, standard counter-tracking procedures. None of it helped. The thing following Velkash was not employing tracking in any sense the Ravak understood. It was simply being present, like a natural force or an inevitable death. After 4 hours, Velkash began to panic. Its radio calls became more frequent and desperate. It reported definite sounds, clear scent trails, obvious signs of pursuit. But when pack members came to investigate, they found nothing. The creature had vanished the moment additional Ravak arrived. It waited patiently while they searched, then resumed its pursuit when they left. Always alone, always patient, always inevitable. By the 6th hour, Velkash was exhausted from constant vigilance and growing fear. Its pack training had never prepared it for psychological warfare of this type. It knew how to fight enemies, evade predators, coordinate with allies. But it did not know how to handle the slow erosion of sanity that comes from being hunted by something that cannot be understood. The creature struck during the 7th hour, but not in any way the Ravak expected. It did not attack Velkash directly. Instead, it appeared at the exact moment when the scout's attention was focused elsewhere. A brief glimpse of movement in peripheral vision, then nothing. A sound that might have been breathing, then silence. A scent that suggested predator, then empty air. Velkash spun around, weapons ready, but found no target. Its radio crackled with desperate reports. "Contact! Something is here! I can see! No, it is gone! Request immediate backup!" Pack members rushed to the location, but the creature was already elsewhere. It had moved beyond their search perimeter before they finished surrounding the area. The psychological impact was devastating. Velkash could not explain what had happened because nothing had actually happened. It had not been attacked, wounded, or even directly threatened. But it knew with absolute certainty that death had touched it in that moment. The creature continued this pattern throughout the night. Brief contacts that proved nothing but felt like everything. Glimpses that could have been imagination. Sounds that might have been wind. Scents that could have been memory. But Velkash knew better. Its predator instincts, honed by millions of years of evolution, recognized the signs of being hunted. Something was stalking it with patient, professional skill. Something that thought like death itself. By dawn, Velkash was a psychological wreck. It reported constant threats that other pack members could not confirm. It jumped at shadows, fired at empty forest, called for help that arrived too late to see anything. The pack leader faced an impossible situation. Standard protocols said that if a scout reported enemy contact, the pack should respond with coordinated force. But there was no enemy to coordinate against. There were only the increasingly frantic reports of a scout who claimed to be hunted by nothing. Worse, Velkash's condition was affecting pack morale. Other scouts began reporting similar sensations, glimpses of movement, sounds of pursuit, scents of predators that vanished when investigated. The creature had introduced chaos into their perfect coordination. It had created doubt where there had been certainty, fear where there had been confidence. When the pack leader ordered a full sector sweep to locate the phantom threat, 60 Ravak combed the forest in perfect formation. They found no enemy, no evidence, no explanation for their scouts' deteriorating mental state. But they felt the presence. All of them. Something moved through their search pattern like water through a net. Never quite there when they looked, but always present at the edge of awareness. The creature watched them search from a position that should have been impossible to hide in. It perched motionless in a tree directly above their command post, breathing so slowly that even enhanced senses could not detect it. It studied their search protocols, learned their communication frequencies, memorized their response patterns. Most importantly, it observed how their perfect coordination began to fracture under pressure they could not understand. When the search ended with no results, pack discipline cracked slightly. Scouts questioned their orders, officers doubted their sensors, and everyone wondered if they were fighting an enemy that existed only in their imaginations. The creature had spent one night in the forest and already begun to destroy something. The Ravak had never questioned their absolute confidence in their own abilities. As it returned to the colony before sunrise, the creature that had been Day-Ho experienced something like satisfaction. Not the complex emotion a human might feel, but the simple pleasure of a successful hunt. It had tasted the fear of its prey. Soon, it would taste their blood. Sujin was waiting when it entered the laboratory. "The Ravak radio chatter has increased dramatically," she reported. "They are reporting contact with unknown hostiles, but their descriptions make no sense." The creature nodded without interest. It had already moved beyond caring about radio chatter or tactical intelligence. Such things were human concerns, useful for coordinated efforts and group planning. It was no longer planning. It was simply hunting, and the hunt had only just begun. The creature expanded its hunting territory on the fifth night. Instead of focusing on a single target, it began to stalk multiple Ravak patrols simultaneously. It moved between them like a ghost, appearing in one sector just long enough to be sensed, then vanishing and materializing in a completely different area. The Ravak communication network, so perfectly coordinated before, began to show signs of strain. Reports flooded in from across their perimeter. "Unknown contact, Sector 7, no visual confirmation. Movement detected, Sector 12, investigating. False alarm, Sector 3, sensors malfunction suspected. Request backup, Sector 9. Something is out there." Each report was investigated. Each investigation found nothing. Each empty result made the next report seem less credible. Pack leader Grokhan tried to maintain order through standard protocols, but the protocols were designed for fighting enemies that behaved predictably. This opponent followed no rules that Ravak evolution had prepared them to understand. The creature had learned to exploit their greatest strength. The Ravak communicated constantly, sharing information instantly across their entire network. But that same communication system became a weapon when filled with false alarms, phantom contacts, and mounting paranoia. Every sensor glitch became a possible sighting. Every natural sound became a potential threat. Every moment of silence became a reason for concern. The creature fed their growing fear with carefully calculated appearances. It would show itself just long enough to be seen, never long enough to be targeted. A glimpse of movement in peripheral vision, a shadow that seemed wrong, a sound that did not belong in the forest. Each contact was real but brief. Each sighting was genuine but useless. The Ravak knew something was hunting them, but they could not fight what they could not catch. On the sixth night, the creature escalated its psychological warfare. It began leaving signs of its presence in places the Ravak considered secure: claw marks on trees near their command posts, disturbed ground around their supply caches. Small objects moved from one location to another. Nothing was stolen, nothing was damaged. But the message was clear: nowhere was safe from whatever hunted them. Pack leader Grokhan ordered increased security around sensitive areas. Guard rotations were doubled, sensor networks were expanded, and patrol routes were randomized to prevent pattern recognition. The creature adapted to each countermeasure before it was fully implemented. It had spent days studying their behavior patterns, communication protocols, and tactical responses. It knew how they would react to each threat level, each security modification, each attempt at adaptation. Most importantly, it understood that their strength came from thinking as one unified pack. Every decision was shared, every response was coordinated, every action was part of a larger strategy. So it began to divide them. The creature started targeting individual Ravak who showed signs of stress or doubt. It would follow them specifically, focus its psychological pressure on their weakest points, drive them toward breaking points that threatened pack cohesion. Velkash, the original target, was already showing severe symptoms of psychological breakdown. Its reports had become increasingly frantic and incoherent. Other pack members were beginning to question its reliability. The creature pushed harder. It appeared to Velkash in broad daylight, standing motionless at the edge of a clearing where The scout was conducting routine surveillance, just for a moment, just long enough to be seen clearly. Then it was gone, leaving Velkash to report a contact that other scouts in the area had not observed. "I saw it," Velkash transmitted desperately. "Standing right there watching me. Bipedal, dark clothing, human-sized but wrong somehow." "No confirmation from adjacent sectors," came the response. "Are you certain?" "I know what I saw." But doubt was spreading through the pack network. If Velkash was hallucinating, how could they trust its other reports? And if other scouts were also reporting phantom contacts, what did that mean for pack security? The creature had introduced the most dangerous element possible into their perfect coordination: uncertainty about their own perceptions. On the 7th night, it achieved its first kill, not through direct combat, but through the patient application of psychological pressure that finally broke its target's mind completely. Velkash had been awake for 47 hours straight, afraid to sleep, because the thing that hunted it might attack during unconsciousness. Its patrol reports had become increasingly unreliable. Its pack brothers had begun to avoid it. The creature appeared one final time, standing directly in front of Velkash in an open area where there was no cover, no explanation for how it had arrived or where it would go. "You see me," it said in perfect Ravak language, though it had never learned their tongue. "You know what I am. You know why I am here." Velkash raised its weapon but found itself unable to fire, not from any physical restraint, but from a deeper paralysis that came from finally confronting the thing that had been hunting it for days. "Tell your pack," the creature continued. "Tell them that death walks among them. Tell them that they are no longer the hunters." Then it vanished, leaving Velkash alone with the terrible knowledge that it had been chosen as prey by something beyond its understanding. Velkash's final transmission was a howl of despair that echoed across the Ravak. "Communication network. It spoke to me. It knows our language. It knows what we are thinking." The scout died of shock and exhaustion 90 minutes later. Its body found by pack members who arrived too late to save it and too confused to understand what had happened. The creature had killed without violence, destroyed without damage, won without fighting. Pack leader Grok Han faced a crisis beyond anything in Ravak military history. One of his scouts was dead from no apparent cause. Others were reporting increasingly bizarre encounters with an enemy that seemed to exist outside natural law. Standard pack tactics required understanding the enemy's capabilities, predicting their movements, countering their strategies. But this opponent had no apparent strategy, followed no predictable patterns, and seemed to exist solely to create chaos and fear. For the first time in their species' recorded history, the Ravak began to doubt their own supremacy as hunters. The creature felt their doubt like a physical sensation. It tasted their fear in the air, heard their uncertainty in their radio transmissions, smelled their growing desperation on the wind. The pack was beginning to fracture. Individual members were questioning orders, avoiding patrol duties, requesting transfers to other sectors. The perfect coordination that made them unbeatable was dissolving under pressure. They had no framework for understanding. Su Jin monitored the deteriorating situation from the colony, tracking Ravak communications with growing amazement and horror. "Their entire command structure is breaking down," she reported to Taemin. "They are arguing among themselves, questioning their leaders, abandoning their positions." "And Dai Ho?" Taemin asked. "I do not think Dai Ho exists anymore," Su Jin replied quietly. "What is out there is something else. Something that understands predation on a level that goes beyond intelligence or training." Through the laboratory window, they could see movement in the forest that had been still for weeks. Ravak patrols were becoming erratic, abandoning their precise formations for desperate searches that found nothing. The perfect siege was collapsing from within, destroyed by an enemy that fought with weapons no military academy had ever studied. Doubt, fear, and the terrible knowledge that somewhere in the darkness, death was hunting the hunters. Pack Leader. Grokhan stood in the command center, surrounded by chaos that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. The perfect communication network that had coordinated 60 Ravak warriors now buzzed with confused reports, contradictory, sightings and requests for orders that no military manual had prepared him to give. Sector 4 reports movement but no visual contact. Sector 9 requests immediate backup for unknown threat assessment. Sector 12 abandoning patrol route due to equipment malfunction. Sector 7 scout refusing to continue mission without additional support. Each report represented another crack in the pack's unity. Each request revealed another failure in their supposedly perfect system. Grokhan's second-in-command, sub-leader Thekvor, approached with the latest casualty report. 3 more scouts reporting stress exhaustion. 2 have requested medical evacuation. 1 has gone missing from his assigned patrol route. Missing? Grokhan's voice carried the growl of a predator facing the impossible. He stopped responding to radio calls 6 hours ago. His last transmission was a request to investigate unusual sounds in Sector 15. Search teams found his equipment but no trace of his body. Grokhan studied the tactical display that showed their deployment around the human colony. Red markers indicated confirmed positions, yellow showed patrol routes, and blue marked areas of recent contact reports. The pattern should have made sense. It should have shown enemy movement, tactical objectives, logical attack vectors. Instead, it looked like chaos. Contact reports appeared randomly across their entire perimeter with no apparent connection or strategic purpose. "It is impossible," Grokhan muttered. "No single enemy can be in 12 different locations simultaneously. No individual can evade 60 trained hunters for this long." Thekvor hesitated before responding. "Pack leader, some of the scouts are saying it is not a single enemy. They believe we face something supernatural, something that exists outside natural law." The suggestion violated everything Grokhan believed about warfare and hunting. The Ravak had conquered dozens of worlds by understanding their enemies' capabilities and countering them with superior pack tactics. They did not believe in supernatural threats or impossible opponents. But the evidence was becoming harder to ignore. "Show me the latest communications intercepts," he ordered. Thekvor activated the translation matrix that converted Ravak communications into tactical summaries. The results painted a picture of an army in psychological collapse. Scout reports described an enemy that appeared and vanished without explanation. Equipment malfunctions occurred in perfect sequence to create maximum confusion. Patrol routes that had been secure for weeks suddenly became danger zones where unseen threats lurked behind every tree. Most disturbing were the personal messages between pack members. Warriors who had served together for years were questioning each other's reliability. Scouts were refusing to patrol alone. Officers were abandoning their posts to search for threats that investigation teams could not find. The pack was eating itself alive. "Perhaps we should withdraw," Thekvor suggested carefully. "Establish a new perimeter at greater distance and reassess the situation." Grokhan's response was a snarl of frustrated rage. "We do not retreat from prey. We are Ravak. We are the ultimate pack hunters. No single enemy can defeat us." But even as he spoke the words, doubt gnawed at his certainty. Everything he had been taught about warfare assumed enemies who behaved according to predictable patterns. Pack animals fought in groups. Individual predators had territories they defended. Military forces followed strategic objectives. This opponent followed no patterns at all. The creature that had been Daeho listened to their radio transmissions from a position that should have been impossible to reach undetected. It crouched motionless in a tree directly above their main communication array, close enough to touch the equipment they relied on for coordination. It understood their language now, not through learning but through instinctive comprehension of pack behavior. Every communication revealed their fears, their doubts, their growing desperation. They were discussing withdrawal. The thought triggered something primal in the creature's mind. In the ancient hunts across African plains, prey that ran was prey. That could be caught. Retreat revealed weakness, invited pursuit, transformed hunters into victims. It would not allow them to escape. The creature dropped silently from the tree and began moving toward their command post, not to attack directly, but to ensure they understood that nowhere was safe from its presence. It appeared at the edge of their defensive perimeter just as the sun set, standing in full view of 3 different guard posts. For exactly 10 seconds, it remained motionless while perimeter sensors locked onto its position and guards raised their weapons. Then it smiled. The expression was wrong somehow. Too wide, too predatory, too knowing. It was the smile of something that understood fear and fed on it. Before any Ravak could fire, the creature was gone. But its message was clear. I am here. I am watching. You cannot hide from me. The guards. Reports sent shockwaves through the command structure. The phantom enemy had revealed itself openly, shown no fear of their weapons, and vanished before they could respond. Worse, analysis of the sighting revealed details that violated their understanding of the opponent they faced. The creature had been in perfect position to observe their defenses, close enough to overhear sensitive communications, within striking distance of critical equipment. It could have attacked at any time during the past week. It could have sabotaged their operations, assassinated their leaders, or stolen their intelligence. Instead, it had simply watched and smiled. It is playing with us, Tekvor whispered, staring at the tactical analysis. Grakhan felt something he had never experienced in a lifetime of successful hunts, the cold certainty that he was no longer the predator in this relationship. Recall, all patrols, he ordered. Establish defensive positions around the command post. No one moves alone. No one leaves the perimeter. Pack leader. That will abandon our siege of the human colony. The siege is already broken, Grakhan replied, grimly. We cannot maintain positions when every scout fears for his sanity and every patrol finds evidence of an enemy we cannot catch. The orders went out across their communication network, transmitted to 60 warriors who had never received such commands before. The Ravak did not retreat. They did not abandon their objectives. They did not huddle in defensive positions like prey animals, but they were doing all of these things now. The creature felt their withdrawal like a physical sensation. It tasted victory in the air, smelled the fear sweat of broken predators, heard the communications that revealed their psychological defeat, but it was not finished with them yet. As the Ravak pulled back to defensive positions, the creature began the final phase of its hunt. It would not allow them to regroup, to rebuild their confidence, to remember what it felt like to be apex predators. It began to stalk their new defensive perimeter with the patient inevitability of death itself. The pack that had conquered worlds was about to learn what it meant to be prey. Sujin watched the Ravak withdrawal from the colony's observation deck, hardly daring to believe what her sensors were telling her. They are abandoning their positions, she reported to Taemin. All patrol routes, all forward observers, all siege positions. They are falling back to a defensive cluster around their main camp. Does that mean we have won? Taemin asked. Sujin considered the question while monitoring the creature's vital signs through long-range sensors. Its heartbeat was steady, its movement patterns showed no signs of fatigue, and its psychological profile indicated complete focus on a single objective. I do not think it cares about victory, she replied. I think it only cares about the hunt. And, somewhere in the forest, something that had once been human continued its patient stalking of prey that had forgotten how to be predators. The final confrontation came not as a battle, but as a revelation. The creature that had been Daiho circled the Ravak defensive position for 3 days, never attacking, never threatening, simply being present at the edge of their awareness. The psychological pressure was unbearable. 60 warriors, the finest pack hunters in the galaxy, huddled together like frightened prey animals, while death walked circles around them. Pack leader Grok Han had not slept in 4 days. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt the presence of something watching him. His pack brothers showed similar signs of strain. Warriors who had conquered worlds now jumped at shadows and fired at empty forest. "It is out there," Sub-Leader Thekvor reported unnecessarily. "The perimeter sensors detect it every few hours, but it never stays in one place long enough for targeting." Grok Han studied the sensor readings with growing despair. The pattern made no tactical sense. Their opponents circled their position at random intervals, sometimes approaching within meters of their defenses, sometimes disappearing for hours at a time. It was not scouting their defenses. It was not preparing an attack. It was simply demonstrating that their most secure positions meant nothing to something that thought like pure predation. "We cannot continue this," Thekvor said quietly. "The pack is breaking down. Warriors are abandoning their posts, ignoring orders, talking about desertion." Grok Han knew his second-in-command was right. The perfect discipline that made Ravak unstoppable was crumbling under psychological pressure they had no training to handle. "Prepare the ships for departure," he ordered finally. Thekvor stared at him in shock. "Pack leader, we have never retreated from prey. The pack elders will strip you of rank if we abandon this hunt." "The pack elders have never faced this," Grok Han replied. "Look around you. We are not hunters anymore. We are victims of something that understands predation better than we do." The creature felt their preparation for departure through senses that had grown beyond human limitations. It smelled their fear, heard their desperate communications, sensed their psychological defeat like a physical taste in the air. Victory was within reach, but something held it back from final triumph. Deep inside the predator's mind, a fragment of humanity still existed. A memory of who Dae-ho had been, what he had sacrificed, and why the colonists needed him to return. The internal struggle between predator and human intensified as the moment of decision approached. It could let the Ravak flee and claim victory, or it could pursue them into space and complete the hunt that had consumed everything else it had once been. Sujin monitored the situation from the colony, tracking both the Ravak withdrawal and the creature's vital signs through long-range sensors. What she saw terrified her more than the original siege. "It is not coming back," she told Tae-min. "The readings show complete psychological transformation. Whatever made Dae-ho human is gone. But we are saved," Tae-min pointed out. "The Ravak are leaving. The colony is secure." "At what cost?" "We asked a man to sacrifice his humanity to save us. Now he has done exactly that, and we have created something that may be more dangerous than the enemies it defeated." Through the laboratory window, they could see Ravak ships ascending through the atmosphere. The siege that had seemed unbreakable was ending not in battle, but in panicked retreat. The pack that had conquered dozens of worlds was fleeing from a single opponent who had broken their confidence in what they were. But victory felt hollow when purchased with the complete destruction of one human soul. The creature stood at the edge of the forest, watching the ships disappear into the star-filled sky. Every instinct demanded pursuit. The hunt was not complete while any prey escaped alive. But something deeper than instinct whispered a different message, words in a language it had almost forgotten. "Come home, Dae-ho. Come back to us." The internal battle raged for hours. Predator against human, instinct against memory, the creature it had become against the man it had been. Finally, as dawn broke over the colony, something resembling Dae-ho began the long walk back to civilization. Sujin met him at the colony entrance, flanked by medical personnel and security guards who were not sure whether they faced a returning hero or a dangerous predator. The thing that approached them looked like Dae-ho, but moved with the fluid grace of something that had forgotten how to be human. Its eyes held depths that seemed to measure everyone as potential prey before recognizing them as allies. "Is it over?" Sujin asked carefully. It considered the question with predatory patience before answering in a voice that sounded almost familiar. "The Ravak are gone. They will not return to this world. The colony is safe. And you? Are you safe to be around?" The creature that had been Deho looked at her with something that might have been regret. "I remember who I was," it said slowly. "I remember caring about these people, protecting this place, being part of human society, but I also remember what I became to save them. Both things are true now." Sujin nodded, understanding the implications. "You are not fully human anymore." "No. But I am not fully predator either. I exist somewhere between civilization and wilderness, between who I was and what I had to become." The realization carried profound implications for both Deho and the colony he had saved. He could never completely return to human society, but neither could he abandon it entirely. Over the following weeks, a new equilibrium emerged. Deho remained part of the colony but lived at its edges, serving as a guardian who existed between the civilized world and the dangerous wilderness beyond. The colonists learned to accept him as something unique, a protector who had sacrificed his humanity to save theirs, a bridge between what humans had been and what they might need to become. Word of the colony's salvation spread through the Galactic Alliance, though the full truth was carefully concealed. Official reports stated that the Ravak had withdrawn due to unforeseen tactical complications. No mention was made of individual human capabilities or the psychological warfare that had broken an unbreakable siege, but in quiet conversations between military leaders and xenobiologists, rumors spread of something new in the galaxy. A human who had accessed capabilities that other species did not know existed. A predator that hunted pack animals by becoming something they could not understand. The Ravak never returned to human space. Their reports to their own leadership described an enemy that violated the natural order, a threat that existed outside the evolutionary framework that had guided their species for millions of years. They added humans to a very short list of species, to avoid at all costs. Sujin documented everything in reports that would eventually reach Earth and change humanity's understanding of their own potential. Buried in human genetics were capabilities that millions of years of civilization had hidden, but not eliminated. Under the right circumstances, humans could become something that the galaxy had never seen, apex predators who could hunt both alone, and in packs think both individually and collectively, exist both as civilized beings and as forces of pure predation. The implications were profound and disturbing. If one human could break a Ravak's siege by abandoning his humanity, what could humanity accomplish if it chose to remember what it had been before it learned to need civilization? Deho provided the answer through his continued existence at the colony's edge. He proved that humans could walk the line between civilization and wilderness, between cooperation and predation, between what they were and what they could become. He remained a guardian, a protector, and a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories required the greatest sacrifices. And in the depths of space, other species began to study humanity with new interest and growing concern, wondering what other capabilities the galaxy's newest members might be hiding behind their civilized facades. The colony on Kepler 442b became a legend, saved by a human who forgot how to be human long enough to remember what humans had been before they learned to need each other. It was a victory that came at the cost of one man's soul, but saved 200 human lives and changed the galaxy's understanding of what humanity could become when pressed beyond the limits of civilization. The hunt was over, but its implications had only just begun.